Great. Okay. So we have some interpreters today for Creole, Spanish, and ASL, and we're going to give them a brief 2 minutes to give their introductions and instructions for our audience, and then we'll start. You guys ready? Okay.
Buenos días. Mi nombre es Itiva, pronombres ella, ella, y estoy aquí hoy con Marv's Language Services para proveer servicios de justicia de idioma en español, creol y American Sign Language, ASL. Para la llamada en español, por favor, llamen al 305-707-5958 y pueden accesar ASL por medio del video de Zoom. Si tienen preguntas, por favor, escríbanla en el chat para poderles responder. Estamos emocionados de aprender con ustedes. We're excited to be giving this webinar in English, Spanish, Creole, and ASL. For Spanish, please call 305-707-5958. And you can also access the ASL interpretation on the screen on Zoom. If you have any questions for your speakers, please write a Q&A chat and we'll have them answered for you. To learn more about this Forward Together project, please visit webtails.org/forwardtogether for more information. And also for the speakers, just to remind you to keep a brief pace so all of us interpreters can ensure that we interpret everything to its entirety. Thank you. Have a beautiful day. Edler, you can go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Edler, and I'm here to make the Creole interpretation for you guys. I'm very happy to be with you. I represent FLIC, Florida Immigrant Coalition. So if someone would like to have this interpretation in Creole, please dial 305-928-7611. Thank you. Bonjour tout le monde. Non, pas moi, c'est Edler. Moi, là, je suis avancé avec nous dans le meeting. Ça fait mon plaisir. Moi, je représente FLIC, Florida Immigrant Coalition. Donc, en cas que yon moun ta reme participer dans rencontre ça, vous avez une interprétation en créole, s'il vous plaît, composez numéro 305-928-7611. Merci. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Ty and Marvin, do you guys need some time?
For the ASL, no. I was able to have that introduction folded in with the other two. Thank you.
That sounds good. Thank you. Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. Today's Forward Together webinar is led by a panel of Black immigrant activists located in Central and South Florida, and we'll be discussing the programs that they have been implementing in their communities for creating an intersectional support system for Black immigrants. My name is Sayan, and I'm the director of the Learn, Share, and Change project that includes the 6-week webinar series. And this week's webinar, it will be our 5th. And next Friday on August 14th, we'll be wrapping up the series with our final webinar led by Welcome America. Now, after the webinar series, we're also conducting a statewide online survey to develop long-term goals and strategies to make a more inclusive and immigrant-friendly Florida in the next 10 to 20 years. You can check out our website to learn more about our project at weavetails.org/forward-together. And you'll also be able to find the same link in the chat too. Now, if you have any questions during the webinar, you can leave them in the Q&A chat on Zoom, and we'll have them answered at the end of the presentation by our panelists. And also, if you get kicked out of the Zoom call for some reason, you can always use the same Zoom link that you used to log on right now to log back on. Now, I would like to start by introducing our lead speaker and moderator for today's webinar, Michelle. Michelle is a Black immigrant activist and DACA recipient from the island of Trinidad and Tobago, and she's been organizing actively with her community for over the past decade. Michelle will be leading the presentation and the discussions at today's webinar. Michelle, are you ready?
Hi, yes. Hi, yes, thank you, Sian. Hi, and welcome everyone to Lee's Tales. My name is Michelle Bart. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm here to introduce everyone. So I'd like you to welcome our panelists. And here I'm going to be just letting you know, we'll be sharing slides here so that you can see for what we're going to be doing today. So today we're going to be talking about the state of Black immigrant protection in Florida. And if you could just give me a minute. Lately, technological things we've been working on at the moment. So we're hoping that we will be able to sometimes working at home during the pandemic. We have been working on doing the best that we can do to improve our internet, especially our Wi-Fi. I'm sure you all understand how that is. So today we're going to be speaking on an intersectional approach, and this has to go with the different areas that we have to deal with when it comes to the Black. I'd like to introduce our different panelists today. The first will be with myself. I'm one of the co-founders for the Black Immigrant Justice Coalition. And I'm also a Black immigrant activist and DACA recipient from the island of Trinidad and Tobago. So I'm really happy to be here and be able to let you all know of what's been happening today. And it's also for us to know that we've been going through all of these different experiences. Really, the Black immigrant experience is one where we have to be facing many different dualities. And we have such a long history of the experiences that we have going on in the US and including in Florida. So for our topic today, we'll be talking about, I'm going to be speaking on local policies, the ones that I know of here in our county. And for the next speaker will be Santcha and Etienne, who is with the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, also known as BAJI. She'll be speaking on community actions and support for resources. And then we're going to hear from Mathi Mugilan, I'm sorry, with the Prison to Deportation pipeline, Laura Pierre, who is with Civic Engagement for Florida Rights Restoration, Adwoa Addae, actually, Shive, who will be speaking on the experiences of Black non-binary immigrants, Alliyaah Ruby Henry, who will be speaking on the she, her, speaking on the experiences of Black transgender immigrants, Isra Ibrahim, speaking on the experiences of Black Muslim immigrants, and then Alex Audate, who will be speaking about white supremacy and other roadblocks to efficient advocacy on behalf of Black immigrants. So my experience that I've had has been with mostly located in Broward. I've been working with I'm one of the co-founders for the Broward Immigrant Justice Coalition. I have also been a member with the Florida Immigrant Coalition, the Undocumented Black Network, the Broward Dream Defenders, Students Working for Equal Rights, and the Florida Immigrant Youth Network. I'm also a person who is directly impacted as a undocumented immigrant. I came to the country when I was 5 years old. And also I'm a person with disabilities. Speaking from my my experiences from due to homelessness to all of these different situations, I am also trying to improve my situations with cancer, and so it's a lot of these different forms of hardships that we go through, and they're often unspoken. Meanwhile, in Broward, I'm going to be speaking on the history that we've had here, located here, is starting from It started actually from in response to Miami-Dade, the mayor Carlos Jimenez, who was working in coordination with Trump through his anti-immigrant policies. One of them, which is the detainer request policy connected with secure communities. This is after Trump decided to change it from prosecutorial discretion. Granted, prosecutorial discretion didn't really help to keep everyone safe because there was still racial profiling. And then afterwards, we were working on municipal IDs, which is still something that we're working on today, and currently in process. And then afterwards, we were able to gather together as a coalition and work together and connected with to protect undocumented families who had to do check-ins at ICE with the Miramar Circle of Protection. Also, for myself personally, I spoke at immigration forums, which we did as a coalition together with the JIC and People's Forums, where we spoke and confronted with the Broward Sheriff. And I'm just going to give myself a little minute here for our interpreters to be able to catch up. And so for connected with the forums that we have been speaking on.
Just a little slow down, please. Just a little slow down, please. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Okay. Feel free to let me know when you're ready.
Thank you.
I think we're ready. Thanks for checking in.
Okay, thank you. So connected with these people's forums and the immigration forums, we had confronted the Broward Sheriff's Office about one of them that had to do with the lack of U visas. The U visa is when you are a victim of a crime, and often the people who are victimized are the people who are the most afraid to speak up. And that's often happens with immigrants. And with the Black immigrant intersection, it's so prevalent that we have racial profiling. So when you're trying to ask for protection, who are we going to? We're going to the police, who unfortunately, that's the direct line to where we can get racially profiled. So and that's one of the hardest situations to have to deal with. I personally myself was a victim of a crime and tried to find some form of protection through this process, but then we later found out that they were not certifying for these U visas. They actually had a very high lack of certifications. Then after, so this was confronted through actually one of our lawyers that we have who will be speaking today, which is Addae. And she had created a guidance for their policies for recertification, who you'll be hearing from her also later today. Then afterwards, we had to show as much support as we can after this, because there was a law that came into, that was created in Tallahassee. Before it became a law, we had went to fight against the SB 168, also known as the Federal Enforcement Law. Unfortunately, it did become a law here in Florida, to where this can allow vast racial profiling. It basically deputizes the police to act as ICE and honor these detainer requests. What that means is that when, let's say, if someone gets picked up for a traffic ticket, or if they get picked up in any other way, even before they're convicted of anything, they'll be held in jail for 2 days, and basically the police will inform ICE to tell them to pick them up and send to ICE detention. So we're doing our best to fight back against it. Unfortunately, here in Broward, the current sheriff, who is Sheriff Tony, who he actually, he chose to do the WSO program, which is also known as Warrant Service Officer program. And unfortunately, we wanted to see if we can somehow downgrade that, but it was something that it wasn't possible. It was not possible. And so it's something that we still have to fight for to protect our families, because yeah, so folks need to know how important this is. But we were able to, as a coalition with BIJIC, with the Broward Immigrant Justice Coalition, we divested $127,000 actually with the City Commission through their approval, so that they can be distributed to the pro bono lawyers for outreach for immigrant detainees. So now I'm going to be introducing our next speaker, and this is Santcha Etienne. She works with the Black Alliance for Just Immigration. And I'm just going to check in with Santcha because lately we've been dealing with our our Wi-Fi and connection situation, like issues and everything. Because, but I just want to check in. Santcha, are you there?
Yes, hi Michelle. Hi everybody.
Great, thank you.
Again, like Michelle mentioned, I am Santcha Etienne, a Black immigrant mother from Haiti. I am a community organizer for the Black Alliance for Just Immigration as BAJI. And I am a member, also a member of CLOTA, Concerned Leaders of TIET, and have been Haitian faith-based Haitian faith-based network, have been, and a bunch of other grassroots organizations in the community that I'm a member of. I mean, I don't have enough time to mention all of them because there is a lot. And BAJI, this wonderful organization which I'm part of, is a Black-led national org. And we believe that a thriving multiracial democracy requires racial, social, and economic justice, not for some, but for all. And one of the main reasons BAJI was formed to bring Black voices together and advocate for equality and justice in our laws and our communities. And BAJIs have office all over, like New York, Atlanta, Oakland, LA, Miami, DC, etc. And today, I am so excited to be part of this wonderful webinar with Forward Together about Black immigrant community connection support and action and support for resources. This is what I'm basically going to speak on. And we know that there is no statistic that looks at bail based on immigration status. However, there is statistic on bail amount based on race. Like when the police stop you, they don't know your status, right? They just see Blackness. And it's unfortunate how your skin color or your race can harm you in that sense. So, but there is one thing that they need to know. We are a brave community. We are fearless, and know that we will overcome. And so we know that we are all we got, meaning we need to not only stand up for each other, but we need to show up. How can we do that? Well, we need to first of all, support programs that are creating to support our Black immigrants. And that leads me to talk about one of the programs that I am excited to be part of. It's the Black Mamas Bailout Program. And that took me to a story 2 years ago of this wonderful 21-year-old in Broward County that was detained, and I will not mention name, but she was referred, her case was referred to me to help get her out through Alex, who is one of our panelists, wonderful Alex. And her bail was at $15,000. And that was one of the reasons why she was in jail for so long, because she could not afford the bail. And that's where this wonderful programs that I'm part of again, when Alex referred her, and I worked with her attorney, and we got her out. So when we got her out, we don't just have her out, but we support her. In that case, meaning when we get our Black immigrants or a Black person that was in jail and they need support to enter society, because she was in there for 9 months, and because of the high amount of bail that she could not afford, and she was caged. And it's unfortunate. Well, it's unfortunate. However, so when we support this type of program, we support our immigrant communities, and which Michelle will have a slide later on to show you all the work that we've been doing to support our immigrant communities. And one other way beside the Black Mamas Bailout Program, it's through restorative justice with FemSage, which you are showing right now. This was a collaborative work we did with FemSage to uplift the restorative justice, RJ Circle, and immigration. And that helps healing through mental healing, physical and spiritually. So we have a link also in there that support FemSage, that help the community through restorative justice circle. And we have go back to this wonderful young woman. And when she came out, she had a 2-year-old at that time, and her grandmother was supporting her while in jail and taking care of her 2-year-old. And when I met this woman, I tell you, she was crying because I met her in the place of work. That same day, they were closing that store. They were closing the store. They were running out of business. So, meaning the grandma is out of work now. She has a 2-year-old to take care of. And then her grandchild is in jail, and $15,000 is needed. So when we support this type of program, this is what we do in this community. This is it. And we support her for rent. And then we support for, when she came out, we support having like a nice presentation to welcome her, because you know that when you are in there, she was depressed, thinking about her family, going back to family separation. So this is what we support when we do that. When we pay for a person like her to come out and to reunited with her family. So we are against family separation, which we know this is what's happening now. So we say support organizations that are doing work to uplift our immigrant communities. But at the same talking, we see the unfairness through that high bail amount. And we all know immigration also carries bail, and their bail are most likely higher than criminal bails. Alex can talk to you more about that later on. But we mentioned that is just to tell you, this woman, as an example, was in there because the money was too high. She couldn't afford it. And so with all that being said, when we create this type of programs, this is what we do. And we ask in every capacity that you can to support, and whichever work that you are doing, to find a way to support, be part of an action, be part of an organizations that are doing work in this community. We have a bunch of Black-led organizations that are doing work in the community, and it's being shared with you on the screen. That we are doing during COVID-19. We do mutual aid, 2 ways: help with cash assistance for the undocumented immigrants. We do food distributions in the community. Both ways, we do walk-in or drive-through, because we know that there are folks in our communities that don't have the transportation or car to come, so we have to serve everyone. So family food distribution. And so we put our donation link out. It's COVID-19 Relief Fund. And when you go in there, you support these programs that are there to uplift our community. So I am begging you that already part of, if you are already part of an organization or helping, I thank you. If you have in mind or in process to do so, please, if you are working, just run to get in, because they do need your help. Like I said earlier, we are all we got. They will not do it for us. We must stand up for each other, with each other, and believe it, the brave community that we are, we will overcome. Thank you.
Yes, thank
And
you,
enjoy
Santcha.
the rest of the webinar.
Yes, thank you. And I should mention to everyone that at the end of all of these presentations that we're going to be speaking with the panelists, at the end there's going to be a full list of websites where for each of the organizations where we can where you can be able to donate and show support. We really need it. And it's definitely something that's definitely great work. I know Santcha to do a lot of great work in these areas. So next, we're also going to be speaking with our next panelist, who is Mathi Mugilan, who's going to be speaking about the fight against mass incarceration. Hi, Mathi, are you there?
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, great. Could hear you great.
Awesome. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Mathi Mugilan. First of all, I'd like to thank Santcha for the wonderful presentation. And there are also a lot of wonderful speakers. So I am going to go through my slides as quickly as I can, and but present the information in the best clear way possible. As like everyone, I'm also very eager to hear what the other wonderful badass speakers have to say. So yeah, again, I'm Mathi Mugilan, and I'm a community organizer, volunteer with Food Not Bombs Lake Worth, one of the organizers for Black Lives Matter Palm Beach County. So I'm from Palm Beach County. It's the land of the Florida Seminole tribe, land of the Miccosukee, land of the Independence Seminole Nation that has not been ceded to the colonizers, I should mention. And Palm Beach County is south of the land of the Hope tribe and Tequesta tribe. So just wanted to acknowledge that. And also, before I start, I wanted to just set up a context by giving some statistics. So I'm going to read out those statistics right now. So foreign-born immigrants from African countries and Caribbean make up 10% of the Black population in the United States. Nearly 9% of immigrants in the US identify as Black. More than 1 in 5 immigrants facing deportation on criminal grounds are Black. 16% of Black immigrants are undocumented. Whatever the country of origin is, Black immigrants are detained and deported at higher rates than other immigrant groups and are most likely to be deported than any other ethnic groups for criminal offenses, even though there are no evidences that Black immigrants commit higher crimes than any other ethnic immigrant groups in this country. After Hispanic immigrants in this country, undocumented Black immigrants are incarcerated at a higher rate. And of course, this number is much higher than white immigrants who are undocumented. And when Black immigrants are arrested, they are usually set to unaffordable bail amounts, and that means that leads to a situation where Black immigrants are incarcerated and get longer jail sentences. Black immigrants are also more likely than any other non-Black immigrant groups to be deported. Black immigrants who are eligible for deferred action for childhood arrivals, DACA, are also less likely to apply than any other ethnic groups. Less than 2% of the first wave of DACA recipients were actually from countries of Black population. So there are thousands of Liberians here in Florida who came here as a result of the brutal civil war that killed almost like 250,000 people between 1989 and 2003. Many are facing expiration of their deferred enforced departure status just like people from Haiti who are facing threat to their TPS status. During Bush administration, there was a policy that was created that actually forced people who are in DED status to renew their status every year. So another statistics is with regards to Palm Beach County. In the city of Boynton Beach, 16%, almost 17% of population are immigrants from Haiti, and a significant percent of south side of Lake Worth, the city of Lake Worth in Palm Beach County, are also from the same demography. These are the population that Trump usually refers to as people from shithole countries, where like Trump often welcomes people from countries like Norway and calls immigrants coming from black countries as shithole countries. So another information that I would like to share is ICE usually puts deportees to African countries on commercial flights. And right now with COVID-19, many countries have actually closed their borders. And even prior to COVID-19, countries like Eritrea have never accepted people who are deported, which means that, those who are deported are in the state of limbo. I have met some immigrant detainees, black immigrant detainees in Chrome while I was doing visitation. And one person explained a 30-hour flight journey to Somalia, and many of immigrant activists would have known about this. They were only, they were on a 30-hour journey only to be brought back here. Okay, so I'd like to start off with my slides. My first slide, yeah, thank you. Growing up black and undocumented in a heavily policed neighborhoods. Okay, so immigrant experts say that black immigrants face more discrimination and scrutiny than any other migrant groups. So this is, I'm stating the obvious here. We are living in a country where people are racially profiled for being black. People are targeted for police brutality for being who they are. So as a black person, we are more vulnerable to be targeted by any form of law enforcement, and it includes local police to border patrol. Like Florida is entirely border, so border patrol and ICE. Okay, so many of the challenges we face intersect with the challenges of native-born black folks, from housing discrimination to disproportionate representation in the criminal justice system. So usually when black folks are arrested, the criminal justice system treats us as criminals. We usually have longer jail sentences. We don't have, even though the 8th Amendment says that, people are supposed to be guaranteed bail. Like black immigrant folks are usually, kept in detention, kept in jails, and eventually, thrown into immigrant detention. And I can go into detail on that further down. So in terms of, with regards to Florida, often in the communities where black immigrants live, such as Liberia in Hollywood or Sistrunk in Fort Lauderdale, these communities are heavily policed, which makes black folks vulnerable to immigration action. Because these local law enforcement agencies often work closely with Immigrant Department of Homeland Security and ICE, and with these local legislations in Florida, like SB 168 passed, they are supposed to. Okay, and the next point is black and Latinx residents are likely to be. Oh, can we go back to the previous slides? Okay.
Oh, sure.
Okay. So Black and Latino residents are most likely to be stopped by police than white residents. This is, again, I'm stating the obvious. And when stopped, police are twice as likely to threaten or use force against Black people. Black residents are most likely to be stopped and likely to have encounters with the police. While they have encounters with the police, they are twice as likely to be threatened with force or to actually have use force against us. If being Black males makes us a police target, then being Black and undocumented in a poor neighborhood makes us vulnerable to surveillance, punishment, and exile. Last June, a viral video circulated on the internet where a white male was telling a group of Black teens who were just riding on a golf cart in a gated community, just saying that they don't belong there. This cyber community, when the video got viral, found that this person actually was working for Department of Homeland Security. Usually, white people in this country, are in positions of power, and they often, unlike many people, have a lot of prejudice against the Black community, and and it goes really high. The prejudice goes high when people are, of immigrant origin. Okay. Can we go to the next slide, please?
Sure.
Oh, sorry, the previous one.
Mm-hmm.
One more, please.
Okay, the previous one.
Yeah. Intersection of vulnerability, sorry. Yeah. So poverty and racial aspects makes Black immigrants more vulnerable. So this goes without saying, being in poor neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods are actually heavily policed, and getting in, having an interaction with the police leads to incarceration, and incarceration leads to getting into the deportation pipeline. We can go into that detail, but I want to touch more about poverty and how poverty affects racial aspects, and how that could affect, how it makes life living as a Black immigrant so hard. So last year, in 2019, HUD, Housing and Urban Development, proposed a rule to evict people from public housing, people who are undocumented. So this affects, mostly the Black immigrant community. And in schools, there are no explicit scholarships available for Black and undocumented migrants. And when Black undocumented migrants pursue higher education, like bachelor's degree, postgraduate degree, the pool of scholarship actually gets even narrower.
Yes, I agree. I should mention we're a little bit over time, but I could also see if we can find a way if we could also share the statistics also, if you like. For anyone who's interested, we could definitely also connect and share all of this information as well. So, but yes, I definitely agree. For all these things that have been happening, it's something that's definitely has been a continuous situation for us. But yes, I'm sorry, Mathi. Is there? Can I move to the next slide?
Sure, please. Okay, so let's talk about school to prison pipelines. Okay, so schools are supposed to be sensitive locations, right? That's an ICE memo that says sensitive locations like schools, churches, and hospitals are off limits. But this is a memo, not a law. It's a policy. But even without this policy, ICE can have access to undocumented youth in schools. How? Because of the presence of police in schools. And ICE has used information about immigrant youth and has alleged, youth of color as being gang affiliated, and has used that information to detain people. And some of this information actually arises from school resource officers. And this is racial profiling 101. For immigrants and undocumented youth, school pushouts can result in detention, and detention can result in deportation. So this is another aspects of racial profiling of Black immigrant community. So let's move on to the next slide. So effect of local law enforcement policies. One of the popular policies, the broken window policing policy. I would like to talk about that. Broken window policing is common in neighborhoods with large Black and Latinx immigrant population. One example again is Liberia in Hollywood. The application of broken windows gives community members a subordinate position to police officers, and police officers the ability and to use their own discretion in order to define what counts as disorderly. So police can, like, look at someone, who's jaywalking, or like the way they dress, and like they could use that as probable cause to interrogate them or stop them. And it also leads to over policing, and over policing usually affects communities of color. And there's also a higher number of racial profiling of BIPOC youth in this country. And this actually leads to a lot of police brutality issues. And the effect is not just physical, it's also emotional. And one of the effects of emotional is racial trauma. Black immigrant youth are the ones who have a higher number of racial trauma. Racial trauma is a form of racial-based stress and refers to reaction of those who identify as Black, indigenous people of color, to dangerous effects and experience of racial discrimination. That could be a direct experience, or it could be an experience that they see of if anyone who is from their community.
Yeah.
So,
sorry, we're just cutting into time with one of the other speakers, but
okay.
Is there something that we can forward more information for anyone who's interested? We'd like to. There's definitely a lot of information when it comes to what's happening right now, especially with mass incarceration. We definitely like to let folks know that these situations are extremely deep, extremely long. It takes a very long time actually to learn about these experiences. And I actually, so I'd like to check in with you, Mathi. So are you okay with sharing any last word, or we could also
sure. I can yeah, I would like to I mean, like, a lot of this information is very depressing, I know, but so I'd like to just touch on some victories that we had just to encourage the community. So in 2008, New York became the latest blue state to offer pardons to immigrants facing deportations as a result of past criminal convictions. So this is one of the thing that actually affects Black immigrant community is, like past criminal convictions. And in one of the slides, which would also be shared, you could see that, how the law has been changed to fast track immigrants who have criminal convictions into deportation. So New York has offered pardons to people who have criminal convictions, thus stopping them from being on that fast track, following the footsteps of California and Virginia. And same year, New York also became the state following 12 other states to offer driving privileges for undocumented.
Slow down, please. Slow down, please. Slow down. Sorry. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So.
Yes, and actually, maybe we could definitely forward the information as we can. At the moment, we're running a little bit past our time with the information, but it's so much information that's going on right now.
Sure. Yeah.
That maybe we can connect, and for anyone who's interested, feel free to share in the chat, or we can also share this, including the donation links after our presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I just wanted to end with saying that, I mean, there are a lot of actions that are taken to win the rights of the rights of Black immigrant community in this country, and people are fighting through different lines, like non-violent, I mean, like civic engagement with the thing, lobbying the bureaucracy, and also like direct action. And non-violent direct action have won civil rights for the marginalized community. So I would like to say that, I mean, like we should try to encourage the struggle on all fronts, and not put down any form of struggle down. So with that, I'd like to pass on to the moderator. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Mathi. It's a lot of information. I really appreciate it. So we're going to go to the next speaker, who will be speaking today. Her name is, she is with Civic Engagement with the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. Her name is Laura Pierre, and she is a TPS recipient and Haitian community organizer with 6 years experience following with economical racial injustice. So Laura, just wanted to check in with you with how you're doing today. And yes, I'd like to thank you for being here today.
And thank you all so much. It's actually my pleasure. I really appreciate having this opportunity to be on this panel with all these wonderful people. And thank you so much, Michelle, for that. Yeah, so again, my name is Laura. I am an agitator. I am an organizer. I'm here with the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. I'm organizing in the entire South Florida. So that's Miami, Broward, Dade County, all the way out West Florida. And what we are doing at FRRC is we are a grassroots organization, a membership-based organization run by returning citizen. A returning citizen is a person who is formerly incarcerated, who was convicted of a crime. And the reason why we say returning citizen is because there is such a negative connotation behind convicted felon or ex-felon. We have to remember a felony could be driving with a suspended license 3 times, and that's a felony, or having a little bit of marijuana in the car. And so that's why we specifically say returning citizen. So these are people who are dedicated to ending the disenfranchisement and discrimination towards people who have a previous conviction. And not only that, but create a humane re-entry system.
Sorry, please slow down. Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay.
A re-entry system that's going to enhance successful re-entry and increase public safety. So our vision is to grow a base of galvanized returning citizens and grassroots activists so that we can take ownership of our own communities by organizing, being actively engaged in peer-to-peer in public education and around the restoration of rights, voter registration, and criminal justice system reentry. So right now, our priority is to assist people with signing up for assistance to pay their fines and fees. So whether that's court fees or any fines that you have, certain restitutions, we assist folks with that. So, and I will give you the information for the hotline. We have a big program this year. I'm excited to talk about it towards the end. We are also advocating for early release, reducing sentences, and of course, safer environments for people who are currently incarcerated. And so, you know, we are a family, so we are paying close attention to not just the big election, but we are watching the state attorney, the judges, and the local sheriff's race that's going to be happening on August 18th next week. And the reason why we're here is because Florida is one of the only states where automatic restoration of civil rights and the ability to vote will not be granted for any type of offense. This goes along with Iowa, Kentucky, Virginia, that still bars ex-felons from voting indefinitely unless given their right restored by the governor of Florida. And so now when we look at the history of Florida, felony disenfranchisement began in 1838 with the ratification of the first Constitution of Florida. What this means is that it was set into law that folks will not just not have their voting rights, but people wouldn't be allowed to run for office or be in court system. So across the state, millions of returning citizens can't vote. Some states even prohibit people from voting while they're on probation or parole or have unpaid fines, but Florida is one of the only states, one of the only 4 states that still bars people from voting indefinitely. And that is wrong because when a debt is paid, it is paid. And so folks that have paid their fines and fees, they've served their times, they deserve the right to vote. There has only been a handful of attempts to challenge voter suppression in Florida and the entire history, none of which have successfully restored the voting rights for the folks who have been disenfranchised for so long here. But in 2018, with the help of everyone, we were able to restore the voting rights to 1.4 million people with Amendment 4. And if I can put that into perspective for you all, Amendment 4 received twice the amount of votes that it needed to be immediately effective. And so through, and you know, it's hard for us to be able to predict these ballot measures. But even at the early voting polls and passing Amendment 4, it showed 74% of people were voting for Amendment 4. So that just shows a lot. It shows where the people of Florida are moving, and this is something that is really important. And also research also shows that longer prison sentence, at best, they do not prevent recidivism, and they just increase the chance of people reoffending. Florida's criminal justice system is structured to punish individuals instead of rehabilitating them or giving them the proper treatment that they need. So it's really time for us to enact a comprehensive criminal justice system. We have to focus on rehabilitation treatment, protect public safety by reducing this recidivism. And in this, we will be reuniting families, restoring human dignity, providing healing, justice for victims. And also it's saving taxpayers money. And so now this ties back to the importance of engaging the entire community, because when you're building that power at a grassroots level, and which is what FRSC is doing, that's how we are able to hold the criminal justice system accountable and use our resources to bring more jobs, to bring housing, etc., through these policy changes in our communities, because folks deserve a second chance. And you know, you don't think about, you know, voting and housing and jobs, like how does that correlate? But like, we have to remember, like, our returning citizens, they have to come home to raise their children. They're gonna have businesses. They are our community leaders, our fellow neighbors who are paying their taxes. And honestly, if it wasn't for that title that they carry with them, you would not be able to distinguish these people from the rest of society. So why shouldn't we have our rights restored? And so, you know, there's a lot of ways that, you know, a lot of things that blocks us from being able to vote. And one of the ways is the continued use of false claims of rampant voter fraud. That's justifying very strict requirements like having photo IDs. This is often aimed at suppressing the votes of people of color, people who are younger voters who may not have IDs, laws requiring physical street addresses. That's discriminating against groups like people who only have P.O. boxes, such as Native Americans that are living on a reservation, or being in a situation where you are homeless, or even in a situation where you have done your sentence and you're returning and trying to come back into society. And so over the few years we fought, and we have won the right to vote by passing Amendment 4, which did restore the voting rights for over 1.4 million people all across Florida. We registered thousands of community members and to vote. And now it's time for us to make our communities get out and vote. This is probably one of the most important elections in Florida. I'm telling you this, on August 18th, y'all. During early voting, Floridians will have the chance to choose their local state attorney, your sheriff, the local judges. And we have to keep in mind that these individuals are so important. They are the ones who will be holding the criminal justice system accountable. They're the ones who decide how police should be punished or should be held accountable. They even decide how to use our own resources in the community, whether we're just gonna keep using our resources to just throw people in jail for petty offenses, or to use our resources to actually rehabilitate people for mental health, and to get folks the proper treatment instead of just throwing people in jail. Majority of people in prisons or in jail, they actually have mental health issues and should not be in that situation.
Yes, so yes, this is something that's really very important. And one of the reasons why we're speaking on this also is to also a reminder that Black immigrants also have family members who are citizens, who and also friends and neighbors. You just don't know, who you're speaking with, when it comes to these situations, and why it's also definitely important that when voting to speak, to vote in mind of the marginalized folks who don't have a voice in this government, who aren't able to speak, but are just like you. We do everything, in the same way. So that's why it's definitely important for us to support. And that's why we are also definitely in such strong support for our citizen, especially with our Black citizens, as we are there through protests and the marches to show support. So we're working in it's definitely important for us to work in solidarity with each other.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I think, and I appreciate you saying that, using your voice, your vote as my voice. I'm a TPS recipient, so I cannot vote. And so I find power in not just educating folks on why voting is important, but actually getting them engaged so much that they wanna physically make this change happen. And that's what we're doing. We're building power within our community. We're not just saying, hey, just go out and vote, but we're actually saying we're taking our membership. We're telling you to jump on board. We got the boat. We're trying to get people on the boat so that we can make things rock in November. Unfortunately, because of the recent court's decisions, despite the federal ruling stating that it is unconstitutional to stop people from voting because they cannot afford to pay their fines and fees. So you said it before, the conversation is one that must, it's going to take time for us to understand, because there's so much going on, but they all tie together. And so folks who come out of prison, they're working an $8 an hour job and have $10,000 fines and fees, and are expected to be able to pay that in order to be able to participate into society when that's what you're already trying to do. It's not right. And so even though they're blocking us, it does not mean that we will not find a way. We are paying off the fines and fees. So our organization, we are planning on paying millions in fines and fees so that folks can be able to vote in November. Yeah, and so it's all important. And so right now, there's a statewide campaign that's led by local nonprofits, including one established by LeBron James. So this could possibly add the 1.4 million people who's already had their rights restored in 2018. It's just being blocked by the state right now. And so this, like I said, this is one of the most important elections. And so we are organizing the community to get out and vote. We're phone banking. We're gonna be going out to the early voting locations to make sure folks have the proper PPE gear and information that they need.
Thank you so much, Laura. It's such amazing information. I really appreciate you connecting these together, these experiences together, how deeply connected we really are in support of each other. So I really like to thank you for this. And again, we're going to be sharing a donation page. So far we have for donate for Amendment 4 to support each other is wegotthevote.org to help to pay off fines and fees, which unfortunately the Supreme Court, even though the Supreme Court had supported Amendment 4, the current governor DeSantis is forcing people to pay fines and fees, and that's definitely something we should get at eventually also, because we definitely don't think it's right to have to pay these fines and fees. So we're going to go to our next topic and to the next speaker today, who is going to be someone who's a beautiful poet. Their name is Addae, going by she and they. Is a queer non-binary femme and immigrant originally from Kingston, Jamaica. Hi, Adwoa, are you here today?
Yes, I'm here, yes.
Yes.
Yes. Wow, thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Adwoa. I'm so grateful to be here and really appreciate the energy that you're holding the space with, Michelle. So as Michelle mentioned, yes, I'm originally from Kingston, Jamaica. I have been in the US for the past 4 years, and I've mostly organized around issues of climate crisis and disaster recovery, specifically because Black, queer, and trans migrants are dealing with displacement, homelessness, and that makes us more vulnerable to climate crises. But in being invited to speak on the panel today, I have written a poem because I feel like sometimes the poetry can speak more precisely to the feeling that I hope to portray. So I'll read the poem and then I'll speak a little bit more if I have time. And just also wanting to express gratitude to the translators today, and I will try my best with the pace of speaking. Because it's a performance, I might speak a little quickly at some moments, but I'll try to slow down and be intentional about the different stanzas in the poem as well. If I'm going too fast, definitely message me in the chat and I'll slow down or I'll pause. But yeah, I know that there may be challenges with it being a performance. But okay, so here we go. The poem is called Corona Migrates. An unnamed passenger sits within a pocket of my lung. However, unlike myself, the flight attendant will not hand her immigration papers to declare her status upon landing. She is citizen of no nation. She carries no passport or visa to be stamped. After months waiting, sweating, pleading, begging behind glass windows at embassies, spending money I do not have for a visa I may not have gotten, I am on a flight. Out of my home country, zooming through the sky, strapped down to human-made wings. Carrying me, carrying her, to a land they wrongly claim is the USA. This is a plane of mostly Americans, so no one claps when we land, and I'm a bit disappointed because, well, Jamaican as I am, we clap, scream, shout the second plane tires screech hitting asphalt laid flat on airstrips. After decades of having poison poured down our throats, from the media to the school teacher who believes in a brighter future, this is a journey we've waited for our whole lives. One we're told to celebrate and rejoice. One that should open up doors and opportunities and life. The pilot declares, "Passengers, welcome to the Miami International Airport. Remember, if you do not have an American passport, collect your documents and join Custom Line 5. Americans may proceed directly to baggage claim." Undetected, the passenger within my lung leaps out of my nose, jumping from shoulder to palm through air, sticking to bodies unaware. I again must wait for 3, 4, 5 hours in a room locked away, interrogated to make my case. In a tweet, 45 suddenly declares the passenger within my lung, Corona, as the invisible enemy. Immigration, he says, is banned. I know he is not speaking. I know he's speaking about me and not her. Billions are then pumped to fortify detention centers and send military tanks to the southern border. Thousands of embassies globally are shut down, leaving refugees, asylum seekers, farm workers, university students, mothers, fathers, sisters, daughters, children, stuck, split in two, caught between borders, abused in camps, thrown out of homes, fired from jobs, separated from family, scared to seek food and healthcare. Corona, meanwhile, has found the loophole. American passengers, and has sneaked across several borders. She is now in the cars, trains, bags, clothes of the people told to proceed directly to baggage claim. Like a tsunami, she engulfs the population, flooding hospitals and flooding hospitals and morgues with people who quickly become bodies she sucked dry to maintain her speed and momentum. The country buckles, collapsing under itself, yet 45 remains in denial, pointing finger at everything but her, towards me, China, radical leftists, anarchists, Black Lives Matter protesters. He refuses to issue a national lockdown, delays sending money, protective gear, and test equipment to healthcare providers. The House and Senate struggle to make an agreement on a relief package. And in a country where the average rent is $1,300, they guarantee a 1-month payment of $1,200 in the midst of an unending crisis where time itself laughs at the cycles of bills and debt we as humans have been trapped within. The money again goes into the hands and pockets of the American passengers who have savings and land and second homes and remote jobs, who can hide from death with security from health insurance. Not the undocumented grandmas, cousins, aunties, mummies who must now provide essential physical labor in supermarkets and restaurants and schools and on farms, who still, after years of standing on tired feet, struggle to pay rent and feed themselves. Steam erupts from the top of my head as volcanic fuel bubbles within my skin. I want to look at the American passenger and say, it is you who can roam free. It is you who slips through cracks in systems and carry corona to countries across South America and Africa. It is you who has stolen from these very people and left them without resources to respond to crises like these. It is you who has displaced millions of people to build military bases, drill oil, start war. It is you why I left my home, why floods and hurricanes are swiping away my people and my culture. It is you who is criminal. But it is me who is paying for safety, for visas and taxes that finance your global domination. It is me who's put before a judge to argue why I deserve to survive. It is me, it is me. I hope Corona terminates the virus that you are. But I know again, it will be me. But somehow I'll still be here in the soil with my grandmas, aunties, cousins, and mummy. And there we'll be free. For there is where the truth shall be revealed. Thank you all for listening to the performance. Yeah, so I'm not sure how much time I have left. How much time I have left?
You have about 6 minutes.
6 minutes, okay. Yeah, so I wanted to explore in the poem the very construct of migration. The very idea that certain people, even though we share common blood, a common skin, have different levels of privilege of movement. And I grew up in Jamaica, right, where I had a Jamaican passport for many years. I had to apply for a visa to come to the US. But when I came to the US, I got an American passport. And suddenly I can go anywhere in the world. I'm the same person, right? But suddenly a blue book allows me to travel the whole world. So I began to think about that in the context of who actually causes harm, right? Because the very idea of visas is that, you know, you go to an embassy and they interrogate you. They ask you, do you have a job? You know, they're basically trying to find out, is this person trying to come to America and escape, right? So they're judging you and your capacity to be fit in the context of America, to prevent harm and crime, right? So-called. In reality, the people who are causing the harm in the world, the violence in the world, are the ones who are running around gallivanting in different countries around the world, who are going to these countries and taking from them. And specifically, I bring it back to climate because one of the things that I believe fully is rooting ourselves in the land, reclaiming sovereignty and autonomy in the land as a place where we can exercise autonomy and freedom over our destiny. So because of the climate crisis and the ways in which it's causing displacement, I have to look upon that. And for me, one of the main things I desire as an organizer, as a movement builder, as a young person who will be here for many years on this earth, is land for Black, brown, trans, and queer people. Land that we own I use in quotations because I don't believe in owning land. I think we are of the land, but in the context of capitalism, we own the land. But land that we own, that cannot be taken from us, that we can grow food on, that we can build retreat space on, that we can dance and sing on, that we can move on without limitation. So one of the main things I'm hoping is, you know, personally, I'm hoping to fundraise some money eventually to buy some land in Jamaica, because I don't believe that, you know, trans people in Jamaica should have to fight tooth and nail to come to the US to face more violence. I think we can build retreat within our own countries and stay there and feel safe there. We should feel safe in our own countries. So that's one of my missions, is to figure out how do we feel safe in our home countries? How do we build refuge, maroon space in our home countries where we can feel safe? So I'm working with groups in Jamaica right now, one of them being Raise Your Drum Jamaica, which is a group led by an Afro-Indigenous elder, and she's fundraising money to, you know, build a retreat space. And we can send out information on that later on, but that's kind of the work I'm focused on is figuring out land autonomy and food sovereignty, ways in which we can build independence away from the system and not depend on the system, because the system will never, ever, ever meet our needs. So we have to, again, organize to meet our needs. And that's what I'm hoping to continue being a part of as I go through this wild journey of life. With that, I want to thank you all for listening and for supporting and for being here today and sending me a lot of love. Remember to go outside and smell the soil. Put your face in the soil, smell the soil, feel its grounded energy. Look at the leaves, smell a flower, talk to a plant. reconnect to the earth that surrounds us, capitalism takes us away very easily. So, again, gratitude, and I'll pass it on back to Michelle.
Thank you so much, Adwoa. That was such a powerful poem. I felt it within my veins. And I really appreciate everything that you're connecting with, especially with our international community. Just because we as undocumented folks and Black immigrants are here does not mean that we do not care about our home countries. It means that we're trying to cut off the violence that is preparing that's in preparation right now to take over from our own home countries. We're trying to get our resources back and protect them, protect our loved ones and our families. And as Adwoa said, we should not be having to even the concept of owning land, we need to decolonize from this. So I really appreciate everything that you said today. And it's something very deeply to think about. So thank you for everybody. So for our next speaker today, we're going to be speaking with about the experiences of transgender Black immigrants. Our next speaker is Alliyaah Ruby Henry. Alliyaah Ruby Henry, going by she, her, is a Haitian trans woman and a very strong advocate for transgender immigrant youth. So hi, Ruby. Hi, Alliyaah. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about my community, the trans community. My name is Alliyaah. I'm an advocate for protection for immigrant trans youth. And I believe that in the state of Florida, there can be more protection and support for immigrant trans. Particular Black immigrant trans women. I work full-time and go to school full-time, but this is a passion of mine, and I still do the work advocated on behalf of Black immigrant trans youth. I must tell you all a little bit about myself in order and for you to understand why this is important to me. Because the first Black immigrant trans woman I have ever advocated for was myself. As a young trans girl in Florida who has in need of a lot of support, I realized that support from Black immigrant trans women was almost non-existent. The few times that I find services that helping Black trans women, they were in English and not accessible to a Creole speaking trans person like myself. But more than that, I find that the service was simple, not enough. Today, I will talk about just one of the many issues, housing. In order to get help and support as a Black immigrant trans woman, we want to fight both transphobia and xenophobia. When we talk about transphobia, we were talking about everything from discrimination to our violence against trans people. And when we talk about xenophobia, we're talking about everything from discrimination to our violence against immigrants. I feel like the system was just not built for us. So last year, I went to Tallahassee to speak to my representative about one of the many issues that affect trans women in Florida, housing. During my trip to Tallahassee, I talked about two major things, two major obstacles that are often overlooked when discussing the housing crisis affecting Black people. How transphobia is keeping Black trans people out the conversation, and how xenophobia is keeping Black immigrant trans people out of the conversation. Transphobia show up in many ways in the housing issue. Trans people are more likely the unemployed or under-employed. The unemployment rate amongst trans people is 26%. That's 2 times the rate of the overall transgender sample, or 4 times the rate of the cisgender people. So access to safe housing is already limited by that, but then we have the issue of transphobia in social service. So not only are we having a hard time finding work, we having even harder time finding help. 41% of trans people in US report having experienced homelessness at least one in their lifetime. What is that? Social services are not accessible to trans people. Shelter are not safe for trans people. Discrimination, excuse me. Housing issue related to transphobia. Discrimination against trans people when they're looking for the shelter. Violence against trans girls in shelter are how common, and shelter staff routinely do nothing. There are no law, rule, and policy to protect trans girls in shelter. Invasive questions are asking during intake process, like do you have a the most of the time they always ask you question about do you have bottom surgery, stuff like that can make you really uncomfortable. Shelter staff in resident routinely misgender trans people. And many people think for any long-term assisting or rent assisting, social service has for proof of status. For, excuse me.
Alliyaah, can you repeat that for me, hon? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Which one?
The very last thing you just mentioned.
Okay. No. Can you?
Not on that one. The next when you came.
Okay. The Department of Housing and Urban Development plan to move forward with a measure that will permit federally funded homeless shelter to house transgender clients according to the sex assignment at birth. The HUD proposal will reverse a 2016 measure implemented under the Obama administration that built on provision enacted for here either. The 2012 Equal Access rule mandated that shelter are open to all eligible individual and family regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or marital status. And the administration issued further guidance clarifying that the role bearing shelter from denying access to trans people in accordance with their gender identity. Xenophobia. Xenophobia. Many people think of xenophobia as outward violence, but when a trans person is dealing with homelessness and they go into social service and everything is in English, is a way of telling non-English speaking trans people they are not welcome here. Here in South Florida, we found many places where services are offering in Spanish, but not in Creole. This is why advocacy on behalf of Black immigrants especially is important, because we need to make sure that the service are in Spanish and Creole. Because Asian trans people exist. We are here and we deserve service like everyone else. Also, why does someone need an ID to have a roof over their head? Presenting ID can be very dramatic experience for trans people. Trans people who are sick, as students have to out themselves as they present this ID card with their legal name and the sex they were assigned at birth. This process is inhuman and completely unnecessary, but also is create a huge problem for undocumented trans people who might not have an ID. For any long-term assistance or rent assistance service, social service asks for proof of status. For trans people, especially Black trans women or several, is directly linked to her ability to find safe housing. Why should we have to present a green card to show that we deserve to be safe? Black trans women who are immigrant are no less deserving of safety than US-born Black trans women. We all deserve to be safe. This is why this work is important, because we talk about those issues. No one thinks of Black trans women, and they definitely do not think of immigrant Black trans women. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alliyaah. You're absolutely right. We have not been thinking deeply enough about our Black trans community, especially with our Black trans women and who are undocumented and need shelter. They need support. We need to show that we care, and it's not just for the people who we're accustomed to seeing or assuming is deserving of life. So I really, really appreciate you for being here today, and just for your existence. I just deeply appreciate you, Alliyaah. Thank you so much. So, and I should also mention that we're going to be sharing, again, links also at the end of our presentation. And for our next speaker, we're also going to be speaking with Isra Ibrahim, who is going to be talking about the experience of Black Muslim immigrants. Thank you so much for being here today, Isra. Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Like Michelle mentioned, my name is Isra Ibrahim. I'm a Muslim activist organizer. I work on issues of Islamophobia, racism, and community health. And I'm just excited to be here. I want to shout out Alex for asking me to be a part of this webinar, and for the moderators for this webinar. Thank you so much. Before I start, I'd like to recognize that we are on indigenous land, currently occupied land. So I think that's just a very important context.
Sorry. Can you go a little slower, please?
No problem.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, so just to restate again, my name is Isra Ibrahim. And before I begin, I just wanted to give context to the fact that we are on indigenous land, and I think that's an important statement before any political conversation that we have. So, next slide. Yes, so today I will be speaking on anti-Black racism and Islamophobia, and speaking on the recent conditions of Black Muslim migrants in prison and in their interactions with ICE, specifically in South Florida, recent history. Next slide. Right. So to understand the conditions of Black Muslim migrants, we have to understand and deconstruct the systems of Islamophobia and anti-Black racism that exacerbate the oppression of Black Muslims and specifically Black Muslim migrants. So again, Islam is not a new religion in the United States. When we understand that the history of Islam actually came with enslaved Africans, the fact that 30% of enslaved Africans were Muslims. And here is a picture of one Muslim's early African
enslaved scholar, Omar Ibn Said. When we understand that Islam has a very long history within the colonized Americas, we also begin to understand that Islamophobia as a system of racism, as a system of...
Thank you.
Yes. No problem.
We're just going to go.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you some time.
Yes. We're catching up. So for our Spanish and Creole translator and also our ASL translator, to check that we're doing okay. Thank you so much.
No problem. And yes, just to wrap up the slide, to understand that if we understand... Say that again?
Sorry, it's okay. My head, sorry, my bad. Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, so to understand that because Islam has a very long history in the colonized Americas, it didn't just simply start at 9/11. We also understand that Islamophobia has a very, very long history, starting back from slavery here as well. So Michelle, you can go to the next slide. So how do we define Islamophobia? Islamophobia is a racialized system that oppresses Muslims, Black and brown people locally and globally. So why is this important? It's important because we have to understand that Islamophobia as a racist system, as a racialized system, it depends on racial signifiers like color of your skin, clothing, and even political ideas to target and oppress people. So for example, you have Sikh people who are not Muslim, but because they are brown and they have and their men wear turbans, they are racialized as Muslims and often are the targets of a lot of Islamophobic violence at home. Go next slide. Yes, and important again that we make this connection between state oppression of Muslims here and foreign oppression of Muslims abroad. So when we understand that the war on terror and the invasion of Iraq and just a basically Western American imperialism in Muslim countries, we understand that this war on terror campaign that's been going on for centuries is basically justified at home when we oppress Muslims at home with like FBI programs and surveillance. So oppression at home is always connected and linked to oppression abroad. So we really want to make sure that when we think about solidarity movements, when we think about building international movements, that we also make these connections between oppression at home and also oppression abroad. Michelle, you can go to the next one. So this is just a couple of examples of how Islamophobia operates within like culture and society. So for example, you see this magazine cover here in Europe. This was shown in Poland. And basically what it says, the title of it says, Islamic Rape of Europe. And you obviously have a European white woman whose clothes are being torn off by brown men, which are supposed to signify or represent Muslim men. And where have we seen this before? We've seen this with how American society typically depicts Black men, Black masked folks as inherently violent, as prone to raping white women. And so this idea is also recycled in Islamophobia as well. Michelle, you can go next slide. So this is just a couple of examples of what institutional Islamophobia looks like. Media bias, law enforcement, discrimination in sports, national security. National security is a very, very popular one. We obviously have the history of 9/11, but even before that, you would have FBI entrapment in mosques. And in just a personal example is when I went to FIU, and a Muslim student group actually found a recorder in their prayer room, and there was no investigation by the school campus police to even investigate that. So these are just like very small examples of institutional Islamophobia. Michelle, you can go next. Okay, next. So this is a very important slide to indicate how Islamophobia is basically mirrored by the anti-Black racism that exists. So Islamophobia is actually able to exist and even grow and exacerbate because of anti-Blackness. So when you have the Muslim ban and the Muslim registry, that is a reminder in the same policy that was used in Jim Crow era on the war on drugs. The same state infrastructure that was used to build the war on drugs is the same one that is used to build like the war on terror, to basically help target and surveil Muslims. And if you just go down the list, this is just you kind of compare how Islamophobic policies come about, anti-Black racist policies. Next. Yes, and important to state that a lot of anti-Muslim Islamophobic laws come about from state legislators who actually hold a lot of other oppressive views. So anti-Sharia legislation had anti-abortion language, for example, or transphobic laws or things like that. So you see that a lot of this is you see that a lot of anti-Muslim views and policies are perpetuated by similar people who also perpetuate other forms of oppression. Next slide. So the most recent example of Islamophobia is a Muslim ban. So we're all familiar with the Muslim ban, but we also have to understand that Islamophobic policies came before the Muslim ban. So for example, I'm just gonna slow down a little bit for our interpreter to catch up a little bit. Okay. So for example, during the George W. Bush administration, they actually started a Muslim registry that was adopted by both Democrat and Republican administration. The 7 countries that became a part of the Muslim ban were actually being bombed by the Obama administration. So this understanding this kind of recent history helps us analyze how, again, Islamophobia is very much connected with like local policies, but also federal policy as well. And just before I go into the specific details of like Black Muslim migrant conditions, I want to go over how a lot of migrant groups who come to this country who are not white, but they're also not Black, over time they undergo America's whitening experience. So when you take in the Irish and Italian, for example, when they first came, they were looked at as poor. They were kind of demonized and kind of on the lower ladder of the social spectrum. But over time, these groups, Irish and Italian groups, they became white. And because they were able to do that, they were no longer kind of the targets of a lot of like state oppression. But as Black migrants, we obviously can't do that. We're so obviously Black, and it just goes to show how Blackness is very much just kind of criminalized and demonized. Michelle, you can go next. So to go into this recent example, I just want to shout out again Santcha for being a wonderful organizer with me on this case. So in 2017 to 2018, ICE officials shackled 92 Somali detainees on an airplane from Minnesota. They took them to Senegal, but then they brought them back here to Miami. And what happened is during their flight, they were shackled for 48 hours. They reported that they were being beaten on the plane and even forced to urinate on themselves by guards. And they were called a lot of anti-Black and anti-Muslim slurs. So at the same time they were being called the N-word and whatever, they were also being called terrorists. So even this kind of anti-racist language, you see how Islamophobic violence and anti-racist violence is basically kind of exacerbated in there. So other examples of that is when during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, they had a lot of trouble trying to practice their religion. They were not given Qurans. Other prisoners were given Bibles, for example. And just like a lot of anti-Black Islamophobic abuse, both physical and emotional. So both kind of anti-Black and Muslim, anti-Muslim abuse. And what's frustrating about this case was the fact that it just didn't garner as much news, as much coverage, just because to talk about Black Muslim migrants is not the national conversation. For example, when we talk about Islamophobia, usually when we talk about Islamophobia, we focus on Arab Muslims or brown Muslims. So the Black Muslim, even though they make up 30% of the American Muslim population, they really are hardly talked about in a lot of like Muslim majority spaces, and especially when it comes to the issue of immigration. Michelle, you can go to the next slide. So this is a couple of, just to kind of give like a happy note to this. So like the mobilized response to the detainment of Somalis, me, and also again to shout out Santcha, who is a wonderful organizer, and Carlos and other kind of Muslim organizers work to utilize protest and also like kind of donation and online petitioning, a national online petitioning, and also kind of coordinating with other organizers in other states to stage protests to bring awareness to the conditions that many of them were seeking. And actually one of them, one of the Somali detainees who was a young woman, she was actually released following the week of this first protest that we had, and we actually were able to provide her some housing until she could return back to Minnesota. But I wanted to give this, put this in to give kind of a snapshot that when you organize and mobilize community, that it's nothing is impossible. You just kind of have to be there and organize together to politicize yourself and kind of build that power to win. Michelle, you can go to the last slide. And again, organize, organize, organize. All of this may seem like very impossible, the conditions that we're faced of, from like local to like, from the local to the state to federal oppression to even imperialist wars abroad. But when we can organize and politicize community, then we can really build the power to win. And thank you so much again for having me to be a part of this panel.
Thank you so much, Isra. Yes, we need to expand our comprehension of how we're going to be inclusive in our community, especially for the Black and Muslim community and the Sikh community, and just with people, a lot of people in general. We have to think about the people who were actually not paying attention to, silencing, ignoring, and figure out how we can connect, because it can't just be a few of us participating. It has to be with all of us. So I really appreciate you. And these are situations that are happening not yesterday. It's happening right now. It's happening today. So now I'd like to come to bring in our next speaker, who's an amazing Black immigrant organizer and founder and owner of the Queer Migration Law group. This is our very own Alex Audate. And today she's going to be speaking about white supremacy and other roadblocks to efficient advocacy on behalf of Black immigrants. Hi, Alex. Thank you for being here today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I am super excited to be here, and I definitely, super humble to share this space with everybody here. Like everyone else, you know, I want to acknowledge that I am standing on Indigenous land, and I am very, very grateful by the opportunity to share with you all what I have prepared. Michelle, let's get to it. All right. So we talked about a lot of things here today, and it is evident that the realities of Black immigrants is something that is particular and important to be taken into consideration, as that the Black immigrant experience is different from that of other immigrant groups. Yet advocacy for immigrant rights is very white Latinx at times, and there is very little voice for Black immigrants and even less funding. Further, too often in this immigrant, we can go to the next slide. Too often in this movement for liberation of immigrants, we find a way to justify the presence of immigrants on this land by alluding to the labor and by alluding to their contribution to this capitalist economy that we have in this country. But Black immigrants are valuable because they are. They are valuable regardless of their labor. They are valuable regardless of what we believe is a quote-unquote contribution to this capitalist system. So advocacy on behalf of Black immigrants will not link their value to profit, will not link their value to funding, will not link their value to their ability to fuel and further capitalist ideologies. If we want a movement for Black liberation and a movement for the liberation of Black immigrants, we must demand that Black immigrants' disadvantages be recognized, and that funding for services for Black immigrants be not caused by competition, which heavily we find heavily in capitalism and also in the nonprofit industrial complex. So when Black immigrants are seeking to advocate for themselves—
I'm sorry, Alliyaah. Hey, I am sorry to interrupt you and have you to repeat that. You were mentioning, I was able to go all the way until you started to mention about the capitalist, that we're not linked to the capitalist.
Okay, perfect. So when we are talking, okay, let's go to the previous slide, please. When we are talking about a movement for Black immigrants, we must recognize that funding for support for Black immigrants cannot be linked to competition, which is associated with capitalism, and which, when we know the rules of competition are never fair for Black people, and they would be even less fair for Black immigrants. So we must move from a system that commodifies people, that tokenize people, to a system that values Black immigrants and does not ask us as Black people to present ourselves in such a way that we must prove that we are worthy of support and funding. So my presentation to you today is a request that this movement for immigrants' rights support and centers Black people. All Black people, Black trans people, Black non-binary people, Black Muslim people, Black sex workers, Black indigenous people, Black people of all religion, Black people who are documented and undocumented immigrants, single mothers. We have to recognize that the value of Black immigrants is in our existence, in our ability to have survived thus far the violence that is associated with white supremacy, and that we are deserving of being at the head of the table, not a seat at the table. We need to be at the head of the table, because if we want to disrupt systems like the immigration system that is violent, that abuses Black immigrants, then we have to recognize that we have to let Black people lead the way. So when I talk about that, what am I saying? Are we saying that Black people need rescuing? Absolutely not. We are saying that Black people are not asking for favors. Our existence as Black immigrants on this land is a gift to this country and to everyone who benefits from what we bring by our very essence. When we look at funding for nonprofits, and this is why it's important that our movement for Black immigrant liberation not be linked to competition and to capitalist ideas, because the nonprofit industrial complex is not an effective way to advocate on behalf of Black immigrants. We have major national organizations. For example, we have United We Dream that reported in 2017 a $15 million budget. We have organizations that the National Immigration Law Center, who reported $12 million. But we have the Black Alliance for Just Immigration with just $1.4 million. How do these numbers make sense? When we recently had Raíces in Texas release a report saying that 44% of people currently detained by ICE are Black Haitians, and Haitians are not even the largest population of Black immigrants. We have realized that Black immigrants are twice as likely to be put in deportation proceedings. We are 5% of the undocumented immigrant population, but 20% of the people in deportation proceedings for criminal reasons, but the funding is lacking. That's because the funding is linked to the non-profit industrial complex, who is violent, who forces us to show ourselves worthy, who forces us to compete in an anti-Black white supremacist system that does not want us or thrive to have us survive. Our survival, our say in this fight as Black immigrants should not be linked to our ability to compete with white supremacy. If many people who are involved in the immigrant rights advocacy movement, many Black people, could attest to what I'm saying. If we create a system for liberation, but we do it by rooting it in a white supremacist nonprofit industrial complex, we will simply create a new class of oppressors. People who work for nonprofits and are Black immigrants will very well tell you that we are creating a new class of oppressors when we are linking our liberation to the nonprofit system. So what do we do? Michelle, would you please go to the next slide? We create a revolution for liberation, a movement that is not linked to capitalism, that is disruptive, that recognizes our worth is not in the dollars, that funding goes where it needs rather than to who has the connection, that funding goes to the most vulnerable rather than to who has the most access, because we know access is denied, not limited, denied. For Black people who exist at the margins, who exist at the intersection of marginalized groups, we know that access is denied. We have an inability to compete, so our movement for liberation of immigrants will be anti-capitalist and it will be disruptive because our worth is not in our ability to fight for funding. So what do we do? Where do we go? Because I talked about a lot of things here. But Michelle, we have some asks, right? Our move, we can go to the next slide. Our movement here has to prioritize the abolition of the nonprofit industrial complex, because the nonprofit industrial complex adds itself to the societal issues that are already oppressing us as Black immigrants. As a Black queer immigrant, we know that society is oppressing us. But then we enter these spaces that are designed for immigrant rights, protections, we are further oppressed. And if we really want, if we believe that in discussing the state of Black immigrants in this panel, that our goal is the liberation of Black abolition of the nonprofit industrial complex. And we do so by recognizing that white, Latinx, and white people are not the only people who are immigrants. Their access to funding is directly linked to white supremacy. That representation is so much more than having a token Black person in an organization, that we must find ways in our organization so that Black immigrant employees can thrive and stay, because the micro and macro aggression within nonprofits that are predominantly white in the immigrant rights movement drive away Black immigrants activists. We have to find ways that we do not feel entitled to the work and labor of Black immigrants, particularly Black women immigrants. We have to understand that issues and concepts of professionalism and respectability is directly linked to white supremacy, and that Black trans immigrant women who show up in a predominantly white nonprofit space does not have to be professional, does not have to beg to have her humanity recognized, to have her seen as human. There is nothing nice and respectable about a life expectancy of 35 years. Black trans women don't live to see 40 years old, and we cannot be in a movement for liberation asking for niceness in the face of such violence. Black immigrant trans women are struggling with homelessness, and there is nothing being done, but we are in movement spaces where we are oppressing, silencing, forgetting Black trans women. We have a crisis in this country where Black trans women are being murdered. Black immigrant trans women have no space in the immigrant rights movement. Nobody is talking about Black trans women who are undocumented, when we know that the safety and survival of Black trans women is directly linked to their housing situation, the ability to have a safe place to live, to safely travel to and from their various activities. That's how they encounter danger. And we as a society, as a movement for freedom and liberation of Black people or Black immigrant people, cannot do that by relying on a system of white supremacy that dismisses Black trans people, that is violent towards Black people, that seeks to have control over the work and labor of Black people, over our creativity and our magic. We will not concede to the nonprofit industrial complex that seeks to silence us. Black disabled immigrants are precious, valuable, important to this movement. We will not ask them to overwork themselves to prove their worth. Black immigrant organizers, and actually all organizers, can be successful in this movement without overworking, because that's a capitalist concept. Capitalism does not have a space, and capitalist notions of competition, of overworking, of ableism do not have a space in a movement for liberation. So when the title of my presentation said advocacy by who and for who, right now we have advocacy by white immigrants for white immigrants, but we have to have a movement where we had advocacy by Black immigrants for all immigrants, because when we show up in spaces, we bring diversity, we bring representation, we bring solutions. We think of everything because we're always forgotten. We don't let anyone be the afterthought, because this movement always leaves us last. We know way too well what it's like to be last. That's why when Black women show up, we demand for all people to be at the table. So when you put a Black immigrant, a Black trans woman immigrant at the head of the table, you are guaranteed to have a movement that extends itself to all people. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alex. You said everything that that a lot of people have been feeling and have been experiencing. We need to think that we can't keep expecting these capitalist notions to kill us. It's not fair. It's not fair. When there's so much privilege happening on the higher ranks, we should allow our most marginalized folks and to not be marginalized anymore, to not feel like to have to be a marginalized person. And here I'm bringing the quote from Emily Towns, that sacrifice is a dangerous notion. It is dangerous because we often ask those who are the most vulnerable to give the most. That's something to think about. It's really important to think about, because it's been dangerous here, going on over here, and we really need to find change. And with that, we need to see how we can find how we can support each other. I'm just going to speak on a personal note really quick before going on to the next slide, is that there are a lot of orgs that receive money based on Black immigrants, Black people, and yet that money, I don't know if it's flowing in the way that it should be. That's really something that we need to think about, and something that we have to actually address. It is an elephant in the room that we can't keep ignoring. It's killing, it's destroying us from the inside, and we need to figure out how to fix that. Because if, meanwhile, everybody is talking about unity, 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 but then throwing Black people, Black women, Black trans women under the bus, Black immigrant women, Black undocumented women, Black people who are in detention and have been sacrificing, speaking up as much as they possibly can. We need to think about who should actually be leading in these conversations. We have the ideas. We know what's going on because we've lived it. So it's something for us to really think about when it comes to this concept of sacrifice. What are you really sacrificing? And with that, I'd like to see how we can figure out how we can get the money that that has been flowing for equity and to support, for us to be able to move forward in these ideas, because there's really amazing ideas. All the people who you've seen today are absolutely incredible. I can't like under speak that, like it. So and this is another reason why we need to think about how we can figure out how to add funding, to add support, to be there when we're asked, when they're asked to show up for them, and to show support. That has to do with linking, you can send donations. It has to do with leadership in our community spaces, and to figure out how we can work through this, because it's not like we don't want to work together. It's just that we need to actually be working together, and letting us move forward in our actual core values. And so it's something that we should be living in and moving forward in. So with that, I'm adding here, these are some ways to support. And it's actually something that's really important to help the flow of funds to be supported into projects that desperately need the help. Have been, even though we hear of Marsha P. Johnson, we need to feel that for Black trans immigrants, that there is money that's going to it. For each, I like to see for each picture of Marsha P. Johnson, of Audre Lorde, of our folks, for all their speakers today, to see that we're going to be funding them, and we're going to be supporting each other. Because really, when you think about it, with the climate today, that's really all we got. So here we have some donation links. The first one has to do with the Black LGBTQIA Migrant Project, the Okra Project, which helps with housing and funds for Black trans immigrants, the Black Trans Education Foundation, the Black Trans Travel Fund for Safety and Protection, the Undocu Black Network, and Baji, which also has a COVID-19 mutual aid relief fund. There's also connected with Baji is FAMSAJ, These are the youth that Santcha has been working with, actually, and have been having meetings and helping with Black Mamas Bailout, and to help for Black youth who are in the jails, especially Black immigrant youth and Black immigrant mamas. There's also, then we have to connect together with the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, so that to make sure that we are supporting each other, because we're right here with you on the streets, trying to help get out the vote, even though we can't vote, you know, but we're here for you because that's what it's all about. Then there's also the COVID-19 hotline for incarcerated people in the jails, that's connected also with Food Not Bombs Lake Worth. So I really appreciate everything that everyone has said today. I'm going to leave up the donation page, and just a reminder for our Pan-African diaspora that we're also here with you, and we see you. We see all the work that we're doing, and we really appreciate you. And everyone who has been in solidarity and in support for us today. So thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to check in really quick when it comes to any questions and answers. If there's anything that anyone would like to connect with, you can also connect with Weave Tales, which who has been organizing with questions and answers for our webinar today. And I would like to appreciate everyone who has been reaching out, who have been able to support us. I'm glad that we were able to be able to have space, but we're also working on seeing how we can also create our own space, you know, for Black immigrants. We're here, and we really just need to like establish ourselves and work and move forward so that we can support each other. We're trying to find a more equitable foundation for each other so that we can work through the more difficult situations that we have going on, especially in the elections. We have to figure out how we can really support each other and figure out what support really means with each other, because we're here every day. We're your essential workers. We're here giving you information and our manpower, blood, sweat, and tears into this American society that that deserves to care about how it was built. And I'd also like to give appreciation for Weave Tales, who have helped us with our panel today and came to us with the interest of supporting Black immigrants. This is connected with Su Young and Basma with Weave Tales, so that we can see how we can work together. We're learning, we're growing, and it's a process. So I definitely appreciate all of you today. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that, Michelle. A huge thank you to you and the discussions, and for the wonderful, the amazing panel that we had today. Santcha, Mathi, Laura, Adwoa, Alliyaah, Isra, and Alex, they all were able to give us a valuable education on this really important topic. So I really appreciate you all for being here and for all the work that you have done. We did have a couple of questions from the audience, so if you don't mind, I would like to go over them. The first question we had was, I'm going to turn on my video here. Is there a space or coalition that all the panelists are part of? There are not many Black-led and Black-centered immigrant spaces in Florida, but if you all know of one, can you please share that information? That was the first question. Michelle, you can go on and answer this question. It could be somebody else on the panel that would like to chime in.
Yes, this is something that I've been speaking with some folks and trying to figure out how we can create these supportive spaces and spaces for everyone to be included. One idea that I was thinking of is for us to communicate with each other and create a group for Black immigrants, and to see how we can collectively grow together, and support, and especially to support each other. We can. I've been speaking also with Alex Audate with seeing how we can also especially connect and support our Black detainees that are currently detention today, and figure out also safety for folks, especially with Black immigrants, with the situation of police brutality, with racial profiling, with ICE, and immigration, trying to affect everyone who's within the different intersections, see how we can prevent the harm from being pushed forward. So if you like, you can connect with me through browardimmigrant@gmail.com. And also, I'm working with Alex right now so that we can connect with for the Black Detainee Support Network and see how we can share and connect. So I'll be reaching out.
That sounds good. Alex, did you have anything else to add to that?
Well, yes, the only thing that I would like to add is based on everything that I've discussed in my presentation and what we see today, Michelle and I, we are actually in the process of creating a support network. And yes, it's going to be called a Black detainee because we have identified detained individuals, particularly Black trans detained individuals, as being the group that ought to be centered, but we will be providing a support for us and by us. So folks who are interested, please email Michelle. We will be sending launch dates and informations and gatherings and ways where we can come together in community to uplift each other and be there for each other, because we know that, as Santcha stated, we have to get it done, and we will get it done. We'll take care of each other.
Yeah, perhaps if you can type in your email address in the chat to all the attendees, that will help some of our attendees who would like to be followed up on this topic to email you directly for updates. And of course, you can also send that information over to me too. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great, yeah, thank you.
I was gonna add one last thing. Alex, I'm so grateful. I'm like beyond grateful for everything that you've shared. Because literally, when I was in Miami a few weekends ago, and the situation there, as you know, is very dire with the industrial complex and the groups that are in Miami. But yeah, you know, I'm on the verge of us starting a counter movement. You know, literally, because especially thinking about the ways in which so much money has been flowing into GoFundMe's for Black trans people and underground mutual aid networks. I think it's only right that there is pressure for nonprofits to redistribute their money, and that there are people saying, hey, give us your money, because you're evidently not doing the work that needs to be done, and people are suffering. And so I've been thinking a lot about technology as well, and the ways in which subscription-based services have become a huge phenomenon. Think about Netflix or, you know, these huge platforms. And if people, I mean, in the last few weeks, there's been so many fundraisers, I mean, in New York, in Atlanta, in Europe, where Black trans collectives have raised literally millions of dollars, right? Between New York and Atlanta, I think over 2 million was raised for Black trans housing. So I've been thinking about the people who donate to those, you know, those fundraisers. I'm sure, we can assume, they wouldn't mind giving a monthly donation to a thing like that. And so I've been thinking a lot about subscription-based services that can provide a universal basic income to people who apply or who have access to the service. Because there's so much money that's going around and people need money to go directly to them. And I think a universal basic income is one of the most basic ways we can actually launch a counter movement. So I've been thinking a lot about that and the intersections of technology and Black trans livelihood, because I think technology is something that's underutilized in thinking about how we can actually meet our basic needs. And if people are giving money to these GoFundMe's weekly at this point, that can be pulled into something that can then be distributed, you know, collectively between people instead of GoFundMe's are also attached to social capital, right? So like if you don't have social capital, your GoFundMe will not get money attached to it. And so I'm thinking about ways in which we can kind of begin to like disseminate and have some collective funds available for people. So I'd love to connect with people. This is amazing. I'm so grateful that ancestors conjured up this moment. It's so necessary. It's so important. And I'm excited to continue working together.
Well, thank you so much for that input, Adwoa. I mean, we all loved your poem and your performance on our webinar, which really appreciate. And I really love that idea, and I would love to learn more about it, perhaps after our webinar. I personally found this webinar to be really educational because I'm an immigrant myself too, but I come from I would say I come from a slight, you know, vastly different background that where you guys come from. And I think this was a really good opportunity to let our audience know and let the public know that, hey, there are so many different faces of immigrants in this country that we can't just define all of the immigrants in just one group, right? There are so many different, it's not just about the diversity of cultures, but it's really diversity of the experiences. And there are just so many things that we're all bringing together, which the realm in which we also should make it more visible and make it free, more accessible for Black immigrants to also talk about their experiences. So in that way, I really loved our webinar today. And there's this last question that I have, which is something that I always ask our panelists on every one of our webinars for this series, is what do you think is most urgently needed to make Florida more inclusive and immigrant friendly, especially to Black immigrants? And I hope that this would be something that you guys can go around and talk about a little bit before we wrap up. So perhaps, Michelle, you want to start?
Sure. Yes, actually, so one idea that I was thinking is thinking about our leadership, thinking about who can make the decisions to understand our experience, because no one understands the experience more than the person who's experiencing it. So that's why it's so important to allow there to be a higher platform, a bigger voice. And also to think about, but at the same time, it's challenging because we want to make sure that we're also not tokenizing our people who are speaking up. Also thinking about how can we support. It can be through funding, especially, so that we can feel that we can figure out how we can have protection, this level of protection. I believe that Alex Addae can give more information on that also, with letting us just let us make the decisions instead of putting us in front of like the video. Like, let us make the decisions in the background as to how we can move forward. Because as Adwoa said, we have ancestors who have brought us here despite the history, despite the obstacles and the challenges. We're going through not just like duplicity, but like many different multiple forms of hardship, and yet for somehow we're still here. I definitely appreciate that for everyone who has been able to connect and show support, and to think about that. We have the knowledge, we know what to do, and also just let us live, and think and figure out how we can decolonize our concept of because I also will say myself, I need to decolonize my concepts also. So, and that's why with each person who I speak with, I'm so grateful, because I learned so much from all of the speakers and the panelists here today, and just from everyday life. And also the concept of decolonization is connected with our indigenous folks. So I have to apologize actually myself, because I didn't say in the beginning that I live on Seminole Indian tribe, Native American Indian tribal land, that I need to show love and admiration for the concepts that we have been also learning from. And we learn from each other. We've been learning about anti-Blackness, how to decolonize, how to fight against the capitalist forms and patriarchy happening in the world.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that insight, Michelle. Isra, did you have anything else to say?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of echo Michelle's point, I think for a lot of us, especially like youth organizers, we're often told that we don't know enough, that we just have to follow leadership and whatnot. And while to a certain extent that's true, I think one basic thing that we can do is politicize ourselves, but also politicize and organize with the community that we're like most directly, working and living with. So I think that's very, very important that we provide political education, and also we organize afterwards, not necessarily going out of the spaces that we already kind of exist and live in. And I think that's just something every one of us can do.
Mm-hmm. You're right. Yeah. Mathi, did you want to add anything? We only have about 4 minutes left now.
Okay,
so,
sure.
Yeah.
I just want to just quickly say that it's the first and foremost thing that could bring change is a change of mindset. The change needs to be driven from impacted communities. And I want to give a shout out for Addae to say, who said that, we should not be following the same capitalist model, all the non-profit industrial complex, and capitalism is so much tied to white man's greed, white supremacy. So it doesn't actually serve the purpose, and people with privilege need to step back and let the impacted voices take the lead in the fight against the oppressors.
Thank you. I think you all touched on such important points on this, and especially in terms of where we're headed and what we should do in order to bring a better future for all of us, and to be able to empower the Black immigrant communities throughout. So I really appreciate all the inputs. Did you guys have any questions or anything else you wanted us to talk about a little bit before we wrap up? Okay.
Yeah, I'm glad to be able to see this happen today. I hope that we can find how we can learn from each other and grow from everything that's been going on, and also to see how we can collectively join together, so we can fight the system that's been affecting all of us.
Yes, Michelle, thank you so much. I'm sure that a lot of people in the audience will be eager to learn more about how your collective and the ideas that you have right now will come to fruition in the future. So keep us posted on that. So in addition to Michelle and all of our great speakers that we had today, I would also like to especially thank the staff at the Florida Immigrant Coalition, especially Basma, Camilla, Paula. They have all been instrumental to organizing this webinar, so I really appreciate it. And they've also been able to support us with the interpretations. So that's, I'm very thankful for all the support that they have given to us. And I would also like to make acknowledgement of our sponsors who have made this program possible, including Islamic Relief USA, Welcoming Gainesville, ACLU Florida, Reyes Legal, Mubarak Law, Engage, Florida Immigrant Coalition, We Are All America, Welcoming America, CARE Florida, the Law Office of Karen Winston, Women's March Jacksonville, Human Rights Coalition of Alliyaah County, Southern Poverty Law Center, UF, University of Florida Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, and the Gators for Refugee Medical Relief. And for those of you who want to show support for Black immigrants and activists, you can check out the list of organizations and causes with their donation links that you can see on the screen, but as well as in the chat too. And of course, the links will also be added to the YouTube video once the recording of today's webinar is available on our YouTube channel. Now, before you leave the webinar now, please be sure to answer the poll to be able to share your feedback on this webinar. And also, please consider joining us next Friday again at noon for another and the last of our great webinar series that will be led by Welcoming America on making welcoming cities. As always, you can RSVP on our website forwardtogetherfl.eventbrite.com. And thank you again, everyone. And I hope I'll see you again next week.